The last nail had just gone in. I remember the way the afternoon sun hit the shingles, how the paint on the front door still smelled fresh, how the porch light flickered on as if welcoming me home. My home. I had imagined this moment for months, visualizing myself opening that door, stepping inside, breathing in the space I had poured everything into. But I never got to walk through that door. Instead, I stood at the edge of the gravel path with my duffel bag in one hand and my father's voice echoing like a punch to the chest. Your sister needs it more than you. He didn't even look at me when he said it, just handed me my things and turned back toward the house like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like I hadn't just spent every dollar I had, every weekend, every ounce of energy I owned building that house. For myself, I couldn't move. I kept waiting for someone to say it was a joke, a misunderstanding, a cruel prank gone too far. But no one did. My mom stepped out with that tired smile she wore whenever she was trying to convince herself that what she was doing was reasonable. "You're young, Hannah," she said, smoothing her blouse like she was getting ready for church. "You'll figure something out. Vanessa needs this to start her life." My stomach turned. "You told me this was mine," I said, my voice barely holding together. My mother sighed as if I was making a scene. "It's still part of the family, sweetie, and family helps family." Vanessa stood behind her, arms crossed, not even pretending to feel guilty. "It's not like you were paying rent or anything," she added, voice casual, eyes cold. I almost laughed. I had paid for everything. The foundation, the wiring, the drywall, the appliances, every tile, every hinge, every fixture. It was mine, and they were giving it away like I was a stranger who had overstayed her welcome. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake them. But instead I looked at their faces, blank, resolved, already miles away from me, and I knew. They had planned this long before today. They never intended for me to live here. They just needed someone to build it. Something inside me collapsed in that moment, not just because of the house, but because of everything it represented. I had worked for years to be responsible, to do things right, to be the one they could depend on. And the moment I finally tried to claim something of my own, they handed it over to someone else without blinking. I don't even remember walking back down the driveway. I just remember the weight in my chest, the crack in my voice when I told them goodbye. They didn't follow. They didn't call out. It was as if I had vanished. And that suited them just fine. I rented a room across town that night. Nothing fancy, just enough to sleep and keep the rain off. I didn't unpack. I didn't cry. I just stared at the ceiling and thought, what just happened? The silence was louder than anything. For 3 days, I didn't hear a word from them. No texts, no missed calls. I think they expected me to come crawling back, maybe offering to share the space with Vanessa, like a good big sister. But I didn't. I shut off my notifications and let the silence grow, because deep down, I already knew something they didn't. They had cut corners, and that house they took from me, it wasn't ready to be lived in, but they wouldn't find that out. Until it was far too late. It had started with a conversation over iced tea on a quiet Sunday afternoon. My parents had just finished renovating their kitchen and were beaming with pride at how efficient they had become with managing property upgrades. I was helping Mom wipe down the counters when Dad leaned in and said, "Why don't you build something of your own back here?" I blinked. Back here. He pointed toward the backyard. "A guest house. We've got the space. You're always saying the market's impossible for first-time buyers. This could be your chance." Mom chimed in. "It'll always be yours, sweetheart. An investment in your future. You'll still be close to home, but it'll be your own space." I remember that moment so clearly, the way they smiled, like they were handing me a lifeline. I had been scraping by, living in tiny rentals while working long hours as a freelance designer. I wasn't reckless with money. I had no debts. I cooked at home, reused tea bags, tracked every cent. Still, a down payment on a house in Asheville? It felt like a joke. So when they made the offer, it felt like hope. I spent weeks drawing up plans, nights reading permit regulations, emailing contractors, comparing flooring materials, lighting options, insulation ratings. I was the project manager, the designer, the financial backer, and on many days, the laborer too. I remember pouring cement alongside the workers just to stay under budget. I chose every finish by hand, from the rustic wood panels that matched the landscape to the antique brass handles I found at a second-hand shop. This wasn't just a structure. It was my sanctuary, my future, and I didn't cut corners. Not once. Every contractor was vetted, every invoice logged. My parents saw how meticulous I was. They praised me at every turn. "You've got such an eye for detail, Hannah. You're really growing into your own." I thought they were proud of me. Maybe for once I had done something worthy of recognition. The cost added up faster than I expected, but I didn't complain. I picked up extra gigs, sold a few of my sketches, even let go of my grandmother's old jewelry to pay for the final kitchen fittings. I told myself it would be worth it, that once I stepped inside that house, once I turned the key in my own door, it would all be worth it. Vanessa never came to see the site. Not once. She always had an excuse. Too busy, too tired. Construction dust makes my allergies flare up. But she always asked questions. So, how big is the living room? What color are the cabinets? I thought she was just curious. Looking back, I realized she was taking inventory. And still, I didn't see it coming. Not even a whisper. Not a single hint that I was building something for someone else. My parents watched me spend my life savings on that house and smiled. They watched me drag lumber, argue with inspectors, pass out from heat exhaustion on a July afternoon, and said, "We're so proud of you, honey." And still they let me believe. I think that's what breaks me the most when I look back. Not the money, not even the house itself, but the lie, the performance. They watched me build a future I'd never get to live in, and they did it with love in their voices, encouragement in their eyes, like it was all real, like they were really going to let me have it, until the very last nail. They waited until I had nothing left to give, and then they took it, just like that. It didn't start with the house. Not really. The moment I walked away from that porch, dragging my suitcase behind me like some character in a sad, forgotten novel. I knew this wasn't the first time I'd been pushed aside. It was just the first time I had no more excuses left to cover it up. Growing up, Vanessa was the golden one. She was younger by 3 years, but it felt like a lifetime. She had the dimples, the wide eyes, the soft voice that always knew when to tremble for sympathy. If we fought over anything at all, it was always my fault. "You're the older one, Hannah. You should know better." If something broke and we both stood there in silence, guess who got blamed? "She's still learning. You need to be a better example." I learned early that fairness didn't live in our house. Responsibility did, but only for me. Vanessa could lie through her teeth, and my parents would smile and say she was creative. She once hid my report card because mine had better grades. When I found it stuffed behind the couch and brought it to Mom, she sighed, "Maybe you shouldn't flaunt your success so much. It makes her feel bad." I was 12 when I realized I wasn't supposed to shine too brightly. Not if it made Vanessa feel small. So I dimmed. Quietly. Subtly. I let her take the last piece of cake. I apologized first, even when I wasn't wrong. I gave her my headphones, my books, my time. And later, my money, my weekends, my patience. She lost things constantly. Phones, wallets, even her passport once. And it was always me driving across town, calling embassies, staying up late to fix what she broke. And never once did she say thank you. Not really. Not in a way that felt like she meant it. But the moment that still burns in my memory came the summer before college. I had spent the entire year saving every penny from my part-time job at the art supply store, skipped movie nights, packed lunch from home, ignored every sale sign in every window. My goal was simple: buy a used car. Nothing fancy, just something that would get me to campus and back without begging for rides. My parents had even promised, We'll match whatever you save, sweetheart. So I worked, harder than I ever had. By August, I had $3,400 in the bank. 2 weeks before I was ready to buy the car, Vanessa totaled hers. She wasn't hurt, just careless, and I remember the day so clearly. The sun was out, and Mom was humming in the kitchen when I walked in. Dad was on the phone. Vanessa was in tears. And then I heard it. "We used your savings," Mom said like it was no big deal. "Vanessa needs a car to get to school. You're leaving for college soon anyway." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat was dry. My hands numb. "You didn't even ask me." I finally managed to whisper. She smiled like I was being silly. "We're a family, Hannah. Sometimes we help each other." And Dad, he just shook his head and said, "You'll understand when you're older." Well, I'm older now, and I do understand, just not the way they wanted me to. That was the first time I pulled away. Not fully. I still called, still came home for holidays, still bought Vanessa birthday gifts she barely acknowledged. But something in me had changed. I knew, even then, that love in our house had conditions. It was measured by usefulness, by compliance, and no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough to make them choose me first. I think they were waiting for me to break. I could feel it in the silence. The kind that feels too deliberate. No calls, no texts, like they were giving me space, but only the kind that sets a trap. I imagine them sitting in the living room. Vanessa perched on the edge of her new bed, waiting for the inevitable knock on the door, waiting for me to come back, tail between my legs, and offer to share what was supposed to be mine. But I didn't. I didn't come back. I didn't reach out. I didn't even let myself cry. I just let the quiet stretch. And in that quiet, something shifted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't trying to explain myself or earn back affection. I was simply not available, and it stunned them. They didn't know that by pushing me out, they'd also pushed out the only person who knew how to hold that house together. Literally. Because deep down, I knew something they didn't, something I had tried to stop, something I had warned them about, and they had laughed. It happened near the end of construction. We were ahead of schedule, but money was tight. I had covered almost everything by then: foundation, insulation, HVAC, appliances, even the finishing materials. There were just a few tasks left: final coat of paint, electrical finishes, plumbing inspections. My contractor offered a discounted package to complete it all. But Dad said no. "Why spend more when I've got a guy?" he said, shaking his head like I was the naive one. "You worry too much, Hannah. My guy knows what he's doing. He'll take care of it." I told him it was a mistake. I begged him to let the professionals finish it. I had seen too many projects go sideways at the last minute because someone tried to save a few bucks. But he insisted. "You're not the one paying him," he said. And that shut me up. He was right. I wasn't paying him, because by then, I thought I would be the one living there. So I let it go. If something broke, I'd be the one fixing it anyway, right? It was my home, after all. Except now it wasn't. Now it was Vanessa's problem. And sure enough, 1 week later the calls started. First it was my mother. I let it ring. Then Vanessa. Then my dad. 6 missed calls in one afternoon. I stared at my phone, heart pounding but hands steady. I knew what they were going to say before I even hit play on the voicemail. Mom's voice was tight, clipped, not apologetic but irritated. "Hannah, I don't know if you did something or knew something, but there's a serious issue with the guest house. The plumbing is leaking into the walls, the power keeps going out, and there's this smell. Vanessa can't even move in. We need to talk." I played it twice. Then I laughed. Not because I had sabotaged anything. I hadn't touched a wire, hadn't loosened a pipe. I had done everything right. The only thing I had done was leave. They had done the rest. And now the consequences were knocking. I ignored the voicemail, not out of pettiness, not because I wanted revenge, but because, for the first time in my life, it genuinely wasn't my problem. I didn't owe them an explanation. I didn't owe them comfort. I didn't owe them anything. They had made their choice. And now they had to live in it. The next few days were a mess of silence and static. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't reply to their texts. But I watched. I watched the missed calls pile up, the messages grow more frantic, more desperate, then angry. Vanessa was the first to snap. Seriously, Hannah? Are you going to ignore us forever? I stared at her text until the screen dimmed. Then I let it go. They were unraveling, and I didn't have to lift a finger. That house, the one I had built with every last ounce of energy, was turning against them. The mold was spreading. The power flickered on and off. One of the kitchen outlets sparked. And now the city inspector was refusing to issue the final occupancy permit. Vanessa couldn't move in. Her fiancé was furious. And my parents, they were humiliated. I started getting messages from other family members. First, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Hey, just checking in. Heard things were rough with the house. You okay? Then an aunt. Then my grandmother. It was subtle at first. Concern laced with confusion. But I knew what was happening. They were spinning the story. Rewriting it. Repainting the truth like they always did. According to them, I had stormed off in a fit, leaving an unfinished house behind. After all we did for her, they probably said. We gave her everything. Everything. They gave me nothing but a plot of land I never owned and a lie wrapped in a promise. I could almost hear my mother's voice as she weaved the narrative, her tone soft, rehearsed. We only ever tried to help Hannah. She just gave up on us. My father probably nodded solemnly. She didn't finish the house. Now her sister's stuck. What they didn't mention, what they never would, was that I paid for every square inch. That I laid the foundation, managed the contractors, filed the paperwork, fought the county office for zoning approval. That I poured myself into that house like it was the only place I'd ever be allowed to belong. But in their version, I was the villain. Ungrateful, irresponsible, selfish. It wasn't new. They had done this for years. Twisting truth until it bent around them like armor. Painting me as difficult whenever I dared to speak. She's always been sensitive, they'd say. Hard to please. But now it wasn't just me who had to listen. They had to tell these lies to the whole family and hope no one asked the wrong question. But people were starting to ask. My Aunt Meredith texted. Heard the mold's gotten worse. That true? My cousin Kevin added. Did your parents really not get permits for the plumbing? What's going on? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The truth was seeping out through the cracks in their story, just like the water damage behind those drywall panels. And then, as if the universe couldn't resist driving the knife a little deeper, Vanessa finally called. She didn't even try to fake concern. Emily, she snapped. What the hell is wrong with that house? I blinked. Why are you asking me? She huffed. Dad said you handled everything. You worked with the contractors. You made sure it was done right. I did, I said, calm as ice, until Dad decided to save money and hired someone else behind my back. Silence. Then, more quietly, she added, It's your fault the permits aren't going through. I raised an eyebrow. What permits? Vanessa exhaled sharply. For the plumbing and electricity. The final paperwork was never filed. The city won't let us move in. And that's when it hit me. The punchline. They had assumed I'd live there. That I'd be the one to finish the job. That I'd handle the legalities. But when they pushed me out, they also pushed out the only person who knew how to close it. And now, the city wouldn't even recognize the house as livable. I could have laughed, but I didn't. That's not my problem, I said. Her voice cracked, sharp with disbelief. You think you're so smug, don't you? No, I said simply. I just think maybe you and Dad should have thought things through before stealing my house. She called me selfish, said people were talking, that I was making the family look bad. But I wasn't the one who lied. I wasn't the one who stole. I was just the one who finally stopped cleaning up their mess. I didn't hear from Vanessa after that call. Not for a few days, at least. But I knew what that silence meant. It didn't mean things had settled. No, silence in my family always meant something was brewing behind closed doors. That's how they operated. If you couldn't win with guilt or shame, you regrouped and tried again with manipulation. It didn't take long. First, a call from my uncle. I barely remembered the last time we spoke. Then a message from a cousin who lived 3 states away. They all asked the same thing in different ways. What happened with the house? Why did you leave? Did you really abandon your family? And then came the one voice I couldn't ignore. My grandmother, Agnes. She wasn't the type to take sides blindly. She didn't fall for guilt trips. And she certainly didn't tolerate drama. If she was calling me, it meant my parents had finally dragged her into it. That meant they were desperate. I picked up. "Sweetheart," she said, warm but firm. "I just had a very interesting conversation with your mother." I almost smiled. "Let me guess," I said. "She told you I abandoned them and left behind a disaster." "Something like that," Grandma replied, a knowing edge in her tone. "But I've known you your whole life, and that didn't sound quite right." I exhaled, and for the first time, I told someone everything. Not just about the house, but about the promise, about the lies, about the work I had done, the money I had spent, the years I had tried so hard to be enough. I told her about the betrayal, not just that day, but all the little betrayals that led up to it, the childhood ones, the college ones, the silences I had swallowed because I thought keeping peace was love. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. And when I finished, she let out a long breath. "Hannah," she said gently, "you don't need to explain yourself to me. But maybe it's time they realize not everyone's buying their version of the story." I was quiet. "What do you mean?" "I'm not saying to cause a scene," she said. "I'm just saying let them dig their own hole. And let people see them do it." I considered that. Slowly I smiled. "I'll be at Sunday dinner." I arrived 10 minutes late, on purpose. When I walked in, I could feel it. The air was heavy. Conversations faltered. Some cousins glanced at me curiously. Others avoided eye contact. But I kept my chin up and took my seat like I belonged because I did. Dinner started slow. Small talk. Forced laughter. The usual facade. And then Grandma set down her glass and, in the calmest voice imaginable, asked, "So, Vanessa, how's the new house coming along?" Silence. Vanessa's jaw tightened. My dad cleared his throat. "We're still working through a few issues." "Oh!" Grandma raised an eyebrow. "What kind of issues?" Vanessa shot him a look, but Dad answered. "Just minor setbacks, plumbing and electrical. Typical stuff." Typical? I almost laughed. Grandma turned to me. "Hannah dear, didn't you handle most of that during the build?" I looked at her, and I knew what she was doing. "I did," I said slowly. "Up until the point Dad decided to hire someone else behind my back." The table went still. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't point fingers. I just said it like a fact. And suddenly, I wasn't the angry daughter. I was the one calmly telling the truth, while they fumbled to protect their lie. I could hear it, the whispers starting. My aunt leaned toward her husband. A cousin shook his head. One of my uncles muttered something under his breath. And that was it. That was the moment. Not a scream, not a fight, just the quiet, undeniable realization rippling across a family dinner table. They lied. They stole. And now they were paying the price. They weren't just losing control of the house. They were losing control of the story. And that was the most satisfying part of all. I left the dinner early. Not in anger. Not in shame. I just didn't need to be there anymore. I walked out with my head high, my heart strangely quiet. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. Not my parents. Not Vanessa. Not the cousins, still whispering behind their napkins. The truth was already at the table, and it would stay there long after I left. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed in the small studio apartment I now called home. It was nothing like the house I built. The floors creaked, the windows stuck, and the heater made a sound like it was choking on its own dust. But it was mine. Every bill, every decision, every square inch. Mine. My phone buzzed again. 3 missed calls from Mom. 1 message from Vanessa. Are you proud of yourself? You humiliated everyone. I stared at the screen, then turned it off. I wasn't proud. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anything they could twist or label or pin to a family guilt board. I was done. Because this was never about a house. This was about the lie that had followed me my whole life. The idea that if I just gave enough, bent far enough, stayed quiet long enough, I would finally be chosen. Finally be loved, not for what I could do, but for who I was. But love like that doesn't exist in families like mine. Not when it's conditional. Not when it's earned only through sacrifice. Not when it crumbles the moment you stop saying yes. And I had finally stopped. In the weeks that followed, things got worse for them. The guest house was officially condemned due to unresolved violations. Vanessa's fiancé left. Apparently, he didn't want to build a life on broken promises and faulty plumbing. The city issued fines. Neighbors started asking questions. And still, they refused to take responsibility. They tried again, of course. My mother called from a different number. My dad sent a handwritten letter. Vanessa emailed me pretending to be apologetic, saying we were all under stress, and maybe we can still fix this. But I didn't reply, because I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was just free. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. And in the end, maybe that's what real revenge looks like. Not screaming. Not revenge plots. Not lawsuits or public shaming. Just not going back. Letting them sit in the house they stole from me, watching it fall apart day by day, knowing I could have saved them, but didn't, because they were never trying to save me. I walked to the window and looked out across the quiet street. There were no big revelations, no swelling music, no fireworks. Just peace. That was enough. More than enough.